What is ACT EU doing for non-commercial sponsors?
Activities around the support to academia and non-commercial sponsor is key to the activities of the ACT EU program. We have an action plan that has been developed in collaboration with the colleagues at the European Commission and the heads of medicine agency to support more academia and non-commercial sponsors in general to conduct clinical trials in the EU. The first activity that I would like to mention is about the availability of an interactive map from the ACT-EU website, where basically we have compiled together activities available at member states level, so what is already in place in the different European countries to support more academia and non-commercial sponsor. Another major activity is about the regulatory help desk, the CTIS and CTR regulatory help desk that has been launched almost 18 months ago. This is an initiative in place to prioritize tickets or issues raised by non-commercial sponsor when they access CTIS and might have technical issues or even questions of regulatory nature, in which case we would liaise with the national competent authorities in the member states, and we're trying to speed up the resolution of these tickets. Another initiative that we have in the action plan for the stakeholders is the organization of regular webinars. Also, this is a recent initiative. We started more or less last year, and together with the national competent authorities of the hosting country, we organized this 2 hours webinar where basically academic sponsors have the possibility to present their feedback and ask questions directly to the regulators, while EMA illustrates what we have at European level, and national competent authorities also present more their national perspective, again to support non-commercial sponsors. And so far we have organized five webinars since we launched this initiative. Another point to mention is the fact that in the ACT-EU website we have a paper that has been developed already 2 years ago. There is an exploratory analysis on funding opportunities to support more non-commercial sponsors. So these are the activities that are being followed by the specific priority action that we have to support non-commercial sponsors. And in addition to this, there are other 2 priority actions with focus on activities that can be relevant for this group. The first one is the one about consolidated advice and consolidated pilots, where basically we bring together regulators and applicants to have an early dialogue on scientific or regulatory aspect in relation to clinical trial applications. So there is the opportunity to raise questions and ask for an advice before the submission of the clinical trial application in cities. And the second priority action that I would like to mention is the one on training needs for academia and SME. Just to conclude more on the funding aspect that doesn't fall really within the scope of ACT-EU, there are 2 major initiatives led by the European Commission. So DG Santé has been working closely this year together with the member states with this EU4Health joint action to have a dedicated joint actions to support non-commercial sponsor, while DG RTD is finalizing this clinical research investment plan that is really looking at funding opportunities and creating infrastructure to support more non-commercial sponsors. So all this to say that is clearly a topic relevant for the regulatory network.
You spoke at International Clinical Trials Day, ICTD, 2025 about influencing inclusive clinical research. Can you share what ACT-EU has planned to support the research ecosystem on this matter?
Certainly, this is a very important topic and is becoming more and more a priority for the regulatory network. Let's start with the fact that ACT-EU per se already trying to achieve to have more multinational clinical trials, so trials that are conducted in more than one country or even in different sites within the same country. So this is already with the ambition to have a more inclusive approach and different representation of trial population being recruited at different clinical investigator sites. One of the main tools that we have developed to achieve this objective has been the launch of the trial map last year. So this platform that has been developed really keeping in mind the needs of patients' organization, patients' representative, and healthcare professional enables in a user-friendly format the identification of clinical trials that are running in the EU, also looking at the recruitment status of these sites. So it's possible to see with the trial map which are the recruiting centers, and it is easier for the patients' representatives and also for their healthcare professionals to see where the clinical trials are conducted and sites that might recruit patients. So this would be one of the measures that we have put in place in order to have more inclusive clinical trial. Another relevant point to mention is the fact that the ACTEU steering group has been discussing recently the revision of the objectives for the program as they were dating back to 2022 to make sure that they are really matching the needs of the clinical trial environment. And the new objective that has been included as part of this discussion is specifically to have more inclusive clinical trials, looking particularly at children, women, not only but including pregnant and lactating, and also rare diseases. So having a specific objective of more inclusive clinical trials is also a sign of commitment of the regulators, so EMA, Commission, and Member States, to look more closely at this aspect. One of the first steps to take is really to look at the data that are available in CTIS to do a sort of landscape analysis, so to see the clinical trials that are currently done in the EU, the type of the nature of these trials, and then consider what else can we do to have more inclusive clinical trials in the European Union. And finally, I also would like to mention the collaboration of EMA with the IHI-funded READY project. That is a project that has started 1 year ago that is really looking at having more inclusive clinical trials for underserved and underrepresented population. And EMA is now part of the scientific advisory board and also an observer to the steering group. So having this dialogue with READY, considering that it's such a big initiative with many stakeholders involved and different work packages, is really a good opportunity for us as regulators to have an overview in collaboration also with the NCAs to follow the activities of the project more closely.
In light of the newly published Biotech Act and AI Act, what changes are anticipated that will affect sponsors, and what support or training is being developed to overcome this barrier?
Yes, the Biotech Act is absolutely a game changer, and the draft proposal published by the European Commission in December last year has been really welcomed by the stakeholders and is already building on what works well with the current text that we have of the CTR, of the clinical trials regulation. So the changes that the Biotech Act brings are quite broad. They refer to accelerated timelines for the assessment of clinical trial application, strengthening further the role of the reporting member states of the RMS in the assessment of the application, enabling the submission of parallel substantial modification. Also refers to the concept of core dossier to reduce the administrative burden, and also the use of AI is inevitable, of course, to reflect on the use of artificial intelligence and in the face of the design of the clinical trials and also the evaluation of the clinical trial application. So the changes introduced are quite substantial, but really needed if we want to be more competitive when it comes to clinical trials. So although the text, of course, is now under legislative review, we are already considering how ACTEU could support change management activities to enable basically a smooth implementation and adoption of the final text of the Biotech Act. So this will be through different means, preparation of training materials, workshop, and ensure really that the changes introduced by the Biotech Act will be embraced not only by the EU regulatory network and of course the national competent authorities and the ethics committee, but also for our stakeholders, so for commercial and non-commercial sponsors. So discussions are already in place and plan being done on what will be then the final text of the Biotech Act, considering that right now we only have a draft, but ActEU is expected to be one of the main tools to facilitate the support of change management activities in that respect.
How many non-commercial sponsors have applied for scientific advice, pre-CTA and consolidated? What challenges have they addressed?
Yes, this is one of the main deliverables and activities within the ActEU program. We launched these pilots already over 18 months ago, was June 2024, and the pilots have been running ever since, and they're still valid, and applicants can make use of these pilots. They are really a good opportunity for applicants to have an early dialogue with the regulators. In terms of number of applications, we have received over 30 applications in general, but it's true that only few of them are coming from academia or non-commercial sponsors. So right now we have seen 2 applications being submitted in relation to the SOAP CTCG pilots initiative that is focused on questions of scientific nature, so more on the design of the clinical trials, on discussion on endpoints, and more oriented for more advanced phase clinical trials that can be considered in the context of a marketing authorization application. And the same number, so again, 2 applications coming from academic sponsors in relation to the pre-CTA initiative that is more focused on regulatory or administrative questions, to have a dialogue with the national competent authorities prior to the submission of the CTA in cities. The questions on the pre-CTA particularly have been more around the design of complex clinical trials and how those should have been submitted to cities. And in terms of analysis of the feedback provided by the applicants and also by the regulators, we have just recently published a few weeks ago an interim analysis on the first iteration of applications. And the feedback has been extremely positive, and the initiative welcomed by the applicants, with few suggestions that refer also to expand the scope to cover also medical devices and having ethics committees involved in the process, because right now they are not. So what we are doing with the network and the colleagues at CTCG is really to gather more experience and consider when we will be ready to move to permanent offerings. But so far the feedback from the applicant has been extremely positive, although we acknowledge on the fact that the numbers of applications from academic sponsors is still quite low. So there is some work, I think, to be done in terms of supporting change management activities and reach out more to academic sponsors to inform them of this initiative in place.
What are the key outcomes you are working towards in the next 5 years?
About the next 5 years, yes, we want to be ambitious, that's for sure, because we also recognize that right now we are not that competitive in the European Union when it comes to clinical trials compared to other regions of the world. And there is definitely a willingness to be competitive and strengthen also the governance that we have in place, and streamline the process for submission and evaluation of clinical trial applications. So we have recently launched, again at the end of last year, a new initiative about measurement of key performance indicators, so KPIs, measured against targets. And this refers to increased attractiveness, having more authorized multinational clinical trials in the next 5 years, with a target of having 500 more clinical trials starting from 2026 until the end of 2030, so leading to 100 more trials each year. and this will be in addition to the baseline of trials that we see. And the second key performance indicator is more about time and access to treatment, with the intention to have and see 66% of the clinical trials recruiting patients at the first site within 200 days since the submission of a clinical trial application, when we see that the trend right now is of about around 40% of the trials. So, of course, these targets, we will have to see the trend over time, and these targets can be adjusted to be even more competitive and ambitious. And we will publish the first measurement of the first quarter for 2026 in the next few weeks, and then we will see how the trend goes. But of course, ACT-EU bringing together European Commission, EMA, and member states through HMA is really focused on having activities that will enable the network to achieve those targets. And of course, this will be reflected in the ACT-EU work plan, that is the main document describing the activities of the program. Right now, we are working with the steering group and with the network on the revised version for 2026 and 2027.